Travel to unknown dimensions while shooting the living crap out of everyone you meet. We're taking a quick peek at Midnight Ultra. I'm going to be honest here right off the bat. Midnight Ultra is a difficult game to look at. I've played games before with odd visual design, such as the weird glitch punk art style of Railslave Games' projects, without much issue, but Midnight Ultra isn't hard to look at because it's ugly. It's hard to look at due to how it uses color. Developer Forward Instinct really wanted to make something super stylized with their use of a limited color palette and shading, but, and this is a rather sizable but, there is a difference between stylized art design and trying to burn out people's eyeballs. Thankfully, as the game progresses, new color palette options become available, which range from slightly better to what the crap were they thinking? I, personally, found the Halloween palette to be the only one I could really stand for more than a minute or two of gameplay, and thankfully, it's unlocked by default, so we can begin this discussion properly here, Midnight Ultra, outside of having a really awesome name that sounds like an 80s action movie or sweet electronica album or band, is a first-person shooter in the style of 90s shooters like Quake and Painkiller. While the game is the first project released on Steam by Forward Instinct, they do have some limited experience in the FPS genre with their previous project, The Chosen Few, a multiplayer game pitting invisible ninjas against trigger-happy gunmen. Other than that, the only thing these guys have worked on is some kind of limited-time augmented reality project for Savannah College of Art and Design in 2016. So they're pretty new to the whole making games deal. This inexperience may be part of what led to the visuals that made me feel like I was wearing goggles full of off-brand Pepto-Bismol. But that isn't to say Midnight Ultra is necessarily a bad game, just a flawed one from a design perspective. Developers have tried similar stylizations before, like Platinum Games' Mad World or Drawn to Death by the Barlett Jones Supernatural Detective Agency. Those games were very particular in how they used their stylization, and even with that, they still had some of their own visual issues. So Midnight Ultra had to be very careful with its stylization, and it wasn't. Midnight Ultra's story is also a bit odd, as it seems to take itself rather seriously, even though it's mostly ridiculous. You, the player, are some kind of witch hunter person who've been chasing the leader of some cult only to find out they've opened a portal to another dimension, which may or may not be hell. Being the vanquisher of evildoers that you are, you voluntarily hop into the portal in order to chase down this leader fella. Any and all story in the game is told via lengthy text made to look something like a diary entry. These story bits pop up in between every level, but I'm not entirely sure I was able to get the whole thing out of them. There are sometimes multiple pages of text to read through, but there's no way to change pages manually. The game expects you to sit and wait for a specific unknown amount of time before changing to another page of text, but there's no indication when this will happen, nor if there even is more to read to wait for. Then again, the story is rather simple, being little more than you good guy, them bad guy, and all of it done for reasons. So even without knowing everything in detail, it's still easy to pick up on what's going on. It's easy to pick up the gameplay as well, as it plays like any standard 90s shooter. This is both a good and bad thing. The good is that it's easy to get into if you've had any experience with old school shooters, but it's a bit stale since it doesn't really do anything with these mechanics. The game will lock you off into different sections of a level until you kill all or most of the enemies within the area, kind of like Painkiller, but unlike Painkiller, there's a real lack of variety in the enemies you fight. There's melee guys who run at you or people with guns who shoot at you, with 3 variants of each, and that's it. There's also a lack of weaponry in Midnight Ultra. At the start of the game, you could pick one of 3 guns and one of 3 melee weapons, but there's no way to unlock more, nor even change which weapon you have equipped while in a level. If you pick the shotgun, you're stuck with the shotgun till you die, and the same goes with everything else. It does make it easy to find ammunition for the gun you're using though, since you can only use one at a time, but how ammo is used is a little bit odd. The SMG fires 1 bullet per shot, like in the real world and like what any sensible weapon would do, but both the shotgun and revolver use 5 ammo per shot, and that just doesn't make any sense. The shotgun, I could maybe see using more than 1 bullet if it fired both barrels at the same time, but why does a revolver use 5 bullets just to shoot 1? Does it fuse them together to make a more powerful shot or something? If it does, I don't really notice it, so who the crap knows? Melee weapons in this game are okay. They aren't bad and they do their job well enough, but they all have a slow wind-up time, making it really risky to use. I also can't really notice the difference between any of them. You'd think just using fists over a baseball bat would make for a quick, light attack as opposed to slow, damaging ones, but that's just not the case here. The most interesting thing Midnight Ultra does with its mechanics is adding a double jump, and that's instantly ruined by first-person platforming. First-person games have always struggled with platforming since it's difficult to tell exactly where you are within the game world from that perspective. Even in games like Mirror's Edge, where first-person platforming was the whole point of the title, there were still some problems. Midnight Ultra tries to solve some of these issues with a second jump, but it doesn't really work. Falling into a death pit always feels cheap in FPS games, and while it does add some variety to the level design, having to restart a level due to misjudging a jump is just annoying. Overall, Midnight Ultra ends up being style over substance. I get what the developers were going for, but it really needed a bit more time to cook in the oven. The game is rather short as well, with only 9 levels, which may be a good thing depending on how much you're enjoying yourself. When the game's surrealness hits its stride, such with the level in the motel that may or may not be in another dimension, it can make for a rather interesting experience, but I mostly found myself rather bored with the whole thing. Levels need to be longer, enemies need to be a bit more interesting, and it would be great to not be stuck with only 1 weapon at a time. Oh, and not having my eyes ripping themselves out of their sockets due to the color palette would be great as well. Midnight Ultra is available on Steam for $3.33 US, so it's rather cheap. It's a short and sweet experience that doesn't strive to do much more than it does, but even at that, I can't necessarily recommend it. I mean, look at the crosshairs in this game. They're huge and take up so much of the real estate on the screen. Is it cool that the SMG aims with a pentagram? Yeah, that's kinda cool. Does it actually help me hit enemies and not cover them up? No, it does not. I do hope they can take lessons learned from this game and apply them in the future, since the basic concept is rather cool. The end product, unfortunately, just is not. If they'll actually do that with updates, DLC, or sequel of some kind, or just move on to other projects, currently remains to be seen. Thanks for watching, I'm MegapiemanPHD, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more quick peeks? Check out the video on the left for Hand of Fate 2, a deck-building card game brawler roguelike thing. Or check out the video on the right for Canarium, a first-person puzzle game with Lovecraftian themes.